And for me personally, in my relationship, like I heard this idea relayed to me a lot that I wasn't fully present, that so much of my emotions were wrapped up in the kid, and my partner would be is, when is it my turn? When do I get all of you? When do I get all of your presence emotionally and spiritually? And it was a really challenging part of our relationship. Hi, my name's Lawrence Dross, and welcome to the Family Disappeared podcast. And today we have a great show planned, and we're actually going to have a panel of parents on the show today. And we're going to be discussing some little different nuances in relationship, on being remarried, on having a step parent involved, what that looks like, what are the dynamics within the family. You know, these are things that we need to be discussing because they're really important. And we've been talking about a lot of great stuff, but really digging into what does it look like when you get remarried? What are the effects on your relationship with your partner, your spouse, whoever that person might be, and what's their relationship like with the kids or not like with the kids, and what kind of baggage does that bring in? So I think this is going to be a provocative episode with some really, really great insights, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you're new to the show, welcome. It's great to have you here, and got a lot of great content out there already. If you haven't checked it out, please check it out, and please remember to like, subscribe wherever you're watching, listening, whatever like that. We are a 501c3. There's a donate button. There's also a bunch of great resources in the show notes. One of them is to the 12-step program that's free, and a fantastic way to find some community. There's a Family Hope Project, and a plethora of other stuff. So that's enough out of me. Let's jump in and see what happens. It's such a complex question when you're married and getting divorced, and then people start dating and having relationships and possibly get married again. And one of the experiences that I don't know if I've shared before, or if I talk about it very often, is I was married, and for me, I was really intentional that I never introduced my kids to anyone that I dated. And over a course of 6 years, I introduced them to one person and had some really negative feedback, and I ended up, unpartnering with that person, and then I introduced them to what ended up being my second wife. And for a while there, it was okay. A while there, we had a really couple of great experiences with my two younger daughters. Not really my oldest daughter. This is before everything completely broke apart again. And at a point, I decided that getting remarried a second time would be a great idea. And I spoke to professionals. I spoke to my sponsor within the program and other mentors that I had, and this whole discussion about me being an adult, and this is an adult decision. I don't really need to get my kids to sign off on this, and that's what I went into this proposal with. And what happened for me is, when I proposed to my second wife, my middle daughter at that time stopped talking to me. That was kind of like the impetus. And my youngest daughter said, "Hey, I might need to take a break," but I was able to get her to come meet me for coffee, and we kind of like mended that hurdle, and it didn't turn into full on alienation. But with my middle daughter, I would say if I was to do it again, I would have sat down and have a conversation with her, and not to get her permission, but just to make sure she understood what was happening in my life, the decisions that I was making, the way that I was resourcing myself, and include her nervous system on this transition. And I didn't take into account what a devastating effect that it would have on my child's nervous system, me getting remarried. And from my perspective, it looked like she had to absorb a lot of the energy within the family system, especially from my ex-wife, because I was getting remarried. And at that point, she had to pick a side. And that might not be what happened. That's just my perspective. And either way, I would say getting into a new marriage, yeah, I would have liked to handle it differently. And I had a tremendous amount of resources, and I thought I was making a really phenomenal decision. And in retrospect, and for folks out there, which might be a really wonderful thing to hear, is like, my intent was to be a really great father, and to handle this in a really spiritual and emotionally useful way. And I landed up creating harm. I didn't see the impact zone beyond my actions, and I would change that. And that's yeah, it's a rough segue into this conversation, which has a lot of great parts to it, and I think you're going to find really interesting. And it's also a really, really useful piece of information for anyone that's in that new relationship, or possibility new partnership that they're going to venture on. So with that, I would say, remember, like, share, tell people about this great journey with these couple folks that are coming on, and Yeah, let's jump into it and see what they have to say. Gentlemen, thank you for coming out today to join a panel and talk about some of your experiences with parental alienation, estrangement, erasure, disconnection, whatever terminology you use. And we're going to be jumping into some really cool topics today around what it's like to have a new partner, possibly a new family, and how some of those interactions relate back and are affected by this pathology as well. So I'm going to ask each of you to just introduce yourself. So let's start with you, Alain. How would you like to introduce yourself to the community?
Well, my name is Alain, and well, I guess I can now consider myself as in the past I was an alienated dad because I'm in the process of reunification with my son. Yeah, so this has been going on for a couple of years, and now things are looking up with my son and I.
That's wonderful to hear, and welcome to the show. And just for clarification, how old is your son, Alain, and how was he? He's 25, and this started when he was roughly
The alienation process or the distanciation started gradually over the years after I separated with his mom. So let's say a good 10 years or even more.
fantastic. Thank you for that clarification. And Steve, can you introduce yourself to the community, please?
Sure. This is Steve. I am an alienated dad to a 24-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son, and it's been ongoing limited communication with both of my children, although there has been some change in recent months with some communication with my son regarding college experiences and some communication with my daughter when I got an invitation to a recent wedding.
Wonderful, Stephen, and welcome to the show. And it sounds like stuff is moving, and it also sounds like it's really challenging, and that's definitely going to be part of our conversation today. So, we're going to get started on some questions here, and you both expressed in your introduction how you have been going through alienation, estrangement, disconnection for quite a while, and that there's some different things that are happening in your life. So, I'm actually going to start with you first, Steve. You mentioned that you're just starting to connect with your son a little bit now. Like, what was the extremes and what does it kind of look like now? If you can just give us like a quick overview of what that would look like with your son and then with your daughter as well.
Sure. So I had limited contact with my son starting in September of 2021, and that there were a bunch of circumstances behind that, but it turned into no contact in March of 2022. And that no contact continued for about, I guess it was 15 or 16 months until most recently in July, when my ex had asked to communicate about expenses for college. And I requested that, or I told my ex that I would be communicating directly with my son about those issues, and so started up an email communication. It actually started out in two reunification sessions with a counselor, and then turned into back and forth email communication about college expenses, and then it's turned into an ongoing every other week communication via email, maybe about just what he's experiencing, and trying to be as useful and helpful as I can in that regard. I only have communication through email. I don't have access. I do have his cell phone number, but I don't use it because I haven't been given permission to use that phone number yet. So the only way I have contact is through email at this point.
Oh, wonderful, Stephen. And just tell us a little bit about your daughter. And there's a lot of stuff you mentioned there about money, about consent, about telephone number and access. So we'll circle back to that and touch into that later in the show. But roughly, what's your experience with your daughter? How long has it been, and what does it look like today?
So with my daughter, when my ex and I separated, my daughter was 13, and we were initially in temporary orders. It was a 50-50 custody arrangement. But my daughter, I was told by my ex that my daughter did not want to come to my house. And so I made the decision at that point, rather than litigating the issue, I decided to allow, she was 13, almost 14. I decided to allow her to make that decision. And she chose really not to come to my house. And so that was kind of, I went to all her high school events, and then even into college, went to all her college events, whether, for different activities. But I really had very limited contact. It would occur mostly at events or on holidays or birthdays or that kind of thing. And that went on up until very recently, all the way through. I thought it would change after high school, once she moved out and got on her own and was away from home. But unfortunately, it didn't really change once she went to college and finished grad school. And so then recently, I just had some communication where she let me know. I guess I should go back. In September of 2021, I actually sent an email to my daughter saying that I wanted a change in our relationship, and I actually wanted to have a deeper and more connected relationship. That letter was interpreted in a different way, and then communication was cut off pretty completely until recently, when she let me know where her wedding was and what time and place, and said that if I wanted to attend, I could. And so, of course, I went and attended my daughter's wedding, but more as a bystander than a participant.
Thank you for that, Stephen. And again, so many nuances there in going to a wedding and just being a participant and all the challenges that come along with that, which we will hopefully have time to dig into the show as well. And Elaine, can you tell us a little bit about how long it was that you were disconnected from your son, and what it looks like now?
My story sounds a lot like Steve's, where after separation, we had 50-50 custody. He was supposed to come and live with me. I think it was, if I remember correctly, once 1 week with me or 2 weeks with me, and then the equal part with his mom. But over time, it gradually dwindled to weekends, and then one day in the weekend, or and then after that one night, and ultimately nothing. And so with time, just there was just this distance that was installed between us. But I was always there, present, for his activities. He was an avid athlete, basketball player, there all the time.
And how long was it that you didn't really have much contact? And then, like, you're going through this new phase of growth and reconnection. Just give us a little bit of context for that, so the audience can understand.
Well, the contact dwindled, and it took about 10 years, I guess, for it to really um, come to a point where there was little contact. For example, if I called him, he would respond, a month later, month and a half, 2 months later, via text, or called me back. Um, it's, I guess it got worse after I remarried with my new spouse, and eventually it started to get better for the last couple of months, like the last 3-4 months. He started to opening up and wanted to reach out. So the whole process is on a span of 10, 12 years, easily.
Thank you for that. And we're going to get into some of the relationships and what it's like to be married and have a step parent involved in the process and how that affects everything. But before we do, we're all part of the same community, which is Parental Alienation Anonymous, which is a free 12-step group for any parents, grandparents, or children or siblings, anyone else there that's struggling with this pathology. And my question is, as you're going through this process where you had very little or no connection, and now you're starting to have connection, how has recovery influenced what's happening with your child and with your life in general? And I'm going to start that question with you, LA, first, please.
Recovery for me really started when I found out about the phenomenon of parental alienation. Before that, I really did not understand what was going on. I had my hypotheses. I had pieces of the puzzle that really didn't make sense. But And so it really started to make sense 3 years ago before COVID. I, by chance, found an article on parental alienation. I live in Canada, and here there's a university that has a program on this phenomenon, and that's how I started understanding what was going on. For me, finding about the phenomenon of parental alienation was an eye opener. It just allowed me to finally understand and put the puzzle pieces that I had in my hand that I could not fit together into a coherent whole. And after I've started reading on the research and literature on the phenomenon, I started looking for a support group. And I found a support group, which is PAA.org. And with that, I connected with other parents that were in the same situation. And when that happened, it just, oh, well, for me, it just allowed me just to put away that heavy weight that I had for so many years. To find that other people were in the same boat, that was so liberating. So for me, that is what the support group of parental alienation brought to me.
Thank you for that, Alain. And Steve, like, what has recovery looked like for you and the support group, and has it been useful, or and what's changed with it in your life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lawrence. And gosh, there's so many parts to that. I think like Alain, I was also confused about how things continued to a relationship where I was, a dad that was very connected to both my children, how it sort of gradually was unraveling and there was more disconnection. And I attributed it initially to my fault in the ending of the marriage relationship I had, that this was just what happens. To I strayed from my marriage, and my explanation to myself was that this is just what happens. This is sort of the penalty that comes with those kind of situations and those kind of decisions. And then that was my explanation, and it was hard for me. I was in kind of a place of guilt and shame mixed with, how do I fix this? How do I reconnect? And I was working with a counselor, and the counselor was talking to me, and she said, it sounds to me like you're kind of in a cycle of thinking that's not leaving you in a particularly healthy place. Might I offer this organization? And she actually mentioned Parental Alienation Anonymous, and she is a very, very experienced trauma counselor, family of origin counselor, PMLD counselor, and I got that resource, and I literally just took it, and the next day I looked up the organization, and I immediately started going to, gosh, for the first few weeks, I think I went to, I don't know, 10 meetings, 12 meetings every week for 3 or 4 weeks. And I just was so desperate for support and was trying to rationally make sense of it. And I realized that in these meetings, there's people just like me, and that the alienation was not a result of what anybody particularly did to end a marriage relationship. It is a disease and a condition just like any other difficulty, and it involves two people and it involves a family system, and all of that was revolutionary to me, and it really took a huge weight off my shoulders.
Thank you for that. And how cool is that? Like, we reach out to all the professionals and let them know about our services, but that they're actually having this new tool in their tool belt to refer people out. I didn't realize that was part of your story, that you came directly from your therapist, which I think is just a home run for people out there struggling. And I will say this, for me, it took like 8 or 9 years to even find the term parental alienation. And I was like, what LA had expressed, was just kind of like struggling in like kind of like a glad bag, where you're like all elbows and knees and you can't get out and you don't know what's going on. You know there's something and you know you're in a bag, you just don't know what the bag is. So finding the term has been really useful, and the term sometime is divisive, but the actual research behind that's great. And there's all this information for families and parents out there struggling, so you don't have to go through this huge wave of time that we spent trying to figure out a lot of these things that are going on. I know that you both are currently remarried and in new relationships, and this isn't something we've really discussed on the show often, so I don't want to discount anything we've spoken about because it's all really important, but I do want to tap into some different nuances so we can expand the conversation that the community is having. So I'm going to concentrate on that, and I'm going to come back to some of the points we've already made for anyone out there that's listening that might be a little bit confused by my direction. So Steve, I'm going to ask you first. You're married, and you're struggling with the kids. And what does that look like with your spouse, and how does it affect your interpersonal relationship directly with her, and then how does it affect the family system at large? I'm going to go with you first, please.
So I've been remarried for 4.5 years and was dating a year before that to my current spouse. So, in my situation, thankfully, my new spouse also experienced alienation on her side with her ex and her children. So she fully understands, actually, probably understood it better than I did when I came in, became aware of Parental Alienation Anonymous and sort of really did a deep dive into understanding, this situation and all the parts to it. Like you said, it was all elbows and knees before that. But she really had been dealing with that for 8 or 9 years before she even met me. So she had some really good tools to help me navigate the situation. And she actually had a very good relationship for a short time with my daughter, and for a longer time with my son, actually a very close relationship, which made the alienation actually very difficult for her as well. I would say that as the alienation continued and it got worse, it occupied more of my thinking time and my emotions and my bandwidth. So that unfortunately, there were times where my absorption with this sort of all-consuming thing, which alienation can kind of be that way, or at least I've found it to be. It really started to affect my ability initially to show up in the relationship at times, and I realized that was part of what brought me to coming to the meetings. Was I realized that it was affecting my relationship in a way that I didn't like, and I didn't like the way things were going, and I knew I had to do something different. And that was getting support for myself and not relying on her to be 100% of that emotional and mental support for me as I was going through this.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And just a follow-up question. Now that you have additional support, do you feel like it's opening up that connection, that relationship with your partner, or do you feel like it puts a different kind of pressure because you're spending a lot of time in the community?
That's I actually both those things. That's there are times when my need for support from the community is sometimes in conflict with I don't know how to say it. Sometimes in conflict with other spending time together or connecting in certain ways, or maybe there's a different view of the need for it based on what I view my need for support is, and maybe what her feeling is. But that's that we've been able to navigate that, and I think over time it's been a healthy thing for my relationship because I'm not putting all the weight of that mental and emotional support on my spouse.
Wonderful, wonderful. And thank you for that. And such an important point, like this idea we come in and we expect our spouse to be everything for us, our partner, our best friends, even our family, and they can't hold space for this necessarily because it's so complex and it's so personal. So I think that's really great because there are different sides of that coin. And LA, how is it with your spouse, and what does that look like with the relationship?
Since I found the literature and on the phenomenon of parental alienation, it allowed us to have a certain vocabulary. We were able to have the right words, the right concept to talk about what was happening, and it allowed me to not feel that that guilt that I had for so long, or that second guessing, or is it really my fault? I can't be really my fault because of this. But at the same time, I was in a whirlwind trying to understand. So for me and for my spouse, learning about parental alienation allowed us to have the words to talk about what was going on and to take a certain distance from it also.
So just for clarification, Alay, like did your partner actually do some of her own research? Did you do research and just share it with her? Like what did that look like in context of the relationship?
I No, she did not do any research on her part, but I was doing the research and sharing it. So I was collating all of my research together, and all the written information, all the video information, and I even started sharing it with my family and friends so that they could understand what was going on. And I would share it first with my spouse. So everything that I was learning on the subject, I was sharing it with my spouse, because it was helpful not only for me, but it was helpful for her also to understand the dynamics, with my son, and to allow her not to take things personally, and to support me also when I was having a bad day and taking things personally and forgetting that, to take that distance.
Thank you for that. And for me personally, in my relationship, like I heard this idea relayed to me a lot that I wasn't fully present, that so much of my emotions were wrapped up in the kid, and my partner would be is when is it my turn? When do I get all of you? When do I get all of your presence emotionally and spiritually? And it was a really challenging part of our relationship. And I'm curious, Steve, do you have that challenge, and does it kind of like move? Like some days it's challenging and some days it's just like, okay, like I'm in this place, and my partner just accepts it.
Yeah, man. That has been at times definitely an issue, and the thing is, that's even with somebody who really understands the situation from a personal level. And I think honestly I think that's just part of this journey, is navigating that, because the feeling of loss of children is so deep that it can be all consuming emotionally. And then I found that if I didn't, now that I have support, I sort of have that, I would say, I don't know if this is the right word, but sort of more contained, so that it doesn't feel all encompassing, where it's taking all my mental and emotional and bandwidth, so that I have nothing left to give to somebody in a primary relationship. So yes, but I do think that that was definitely there, and we had to work through how to compartmentalize things so that we have time for our relationship. But I also could do the work that I needed to do to sort of figure this out and support myself.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing the word contained in. And this is really important because this is really leaky and this can overwhelm so many different emotional systems and nervous systems. So, as we work on recovery and as we practice our emotional and spiritual ecosystem, we get to contain this within our communities, within ourselves, so it doesn't knock everyone in our world sideways over and over again. And you might experience your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your partner, where they just don't want to hear it anymore, and the containment and the recovery and the working in community and getting supported other ways gives us an opportunity to have a healthier and different kind of relationship with our families. So, LA, same question for you. Does your partner ever say, hey, like I want all of your attention, I want to be number one, I'm tired of that not being.
Not in my case. I'm a person that's my temperament. I've always been very compartmentalized. And so the day to day, I keep my issues for myself. So when something would happen with my son, I would talk about it that day, or for 2 days, and after that, it'd be pretty much in a drawer until, the next issue. So I really felt like my spouse was always supportive about that, because um, my relationship with my son never took most of my waking hours. So me, pretty much during the day, things were contained, but not at night. So that's where things, I were harder for me. So my sleep was dreadful because of that. I could not contain the emotions and the thoughts and the ruminations at nighttime. So I had years of sleep issues. But during the day, things were good.
And what a great point for you to bring up, because some of us get really busy with our lives and stuff, and we can distract ourselves, like LA is saying, during the day, and then at night you actually have to be with yourself, and the ruminating thoughts, the sleepless nights, the running stuff over and over in your head trying to look for a solution. I think so many of us struggle with that, and it ebbs and flows as that drawer gets open, stuff floods our systems, and then we get fully caught up into those things. And I will say, like, my ex-partner was a therapist. And even though she was a therapist, and even though she had a tremendous amount of skills, like, she still wanted my attention. She wanted me to be really present with her. And it was incredibly challenging, because my kids were always, I would say, they're number one. And that's how it's always going to be. That's not negotiable. And I would say, with some recovery and looking backwards, it would have been useful for me to have a different set of coping strategies, and a different set of maybe emotional tools to be able to show up more presently in my life. And I know so many people struggle with this, and I still struggle with this today. I was on a call before this podcast, and I was just saying, I'm feeling underwater and overwhelmed, and have some transitions going in my life, and it's hard. And that's where the support community comes in. So if you're not part of the community, or you don't even want to be part of our community, there's a bunch of communities out there and a bunch of resources that you can go out and support yourself. And there was also something interesting that was mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast. I think Stephen had said, for the first 3 or 4 weeks, attending 8, 10, 12 meetings a week. And in 12-step program, which 12-step program has been around for 75 some odd years, they call something a 90 and 90, which is for newcomers. They suggest go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And for me, like Steve had said, like, I need a lot of meetings, and when I'm in pain, I need more meetings, and I need to be more of service. And it takes a lot away from the family unit, but it's kind of like being on an airplane and getting oxygen, right? So if you're saying, like, hey, I don't want to commit that kind of time, I'm busy, I have this commitment, I have that commitment, this is going to the gym, this is working out, this is just working out a different muscle and meeting different people that are as important as the food we eat, as important as the exercise we take. And yeah, I just wanted to retouch on that, because it's really important.
Oh, I was just going to say, Lawrence, can I comment on that? Because that's the reason I was in that place of wanting to do that much support was because I got to the place where I could see the handwriting on the wall of really great things in my life, like a great second marriage and a great relationship with my oldest son and my two stepdaughters. I could see that this challenge of alienation was going to wreck the great things I had in my life. And I was like, I'm not going to let that happen. And so I just realized I had to do something. And that was creating support, for myself and becoming part of a community that gets what's going on here. And that's why I did it. It was really more like self-preservation, honestly.
Totally. No, survival definitely kicks up a bunch of stuff.
One more thing, Lawrence and Steve. One thing I instilled is to put certain limit also to the recovery and support group, because I did not. It's a blessing to be part of the support group, but at the same time, um, I wanted to protect myself, and to protect my relationship with my spouse also. So for me, it's really important to be present in PAA and to be of service to the group, but also to a certain limit and not overwhelm myself and overwhelm my relationship. So it's finding that balance, that sweet spot. I feel that is very important.
Yeah, and LA, thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation because we're all different and we have different needs, and I love that you're prioritizing your relationship and taking care of yourself. It's not an either or; it's both and you're finding a balance that suits your lifestyle. And anyone out there, we're just sharing our opinions. You find what feels good for you, and try it. And if it doesn't work, try something different. And I think this is all an experiment. Like we're just trying to take the best care of ourselves we can, and balance, like LA said, is incredibly important and welcomed. I love that you're taking care of yourself that way. So the question that I have is, as this alienation, estrangement, reconnection, whatever is happening is going on, do you find your spouse disconnecting from the idea of the kids, like basically like shutting down and pulling away and not really wanting to engage in the idea or the thought of them, kind of like they're protecting themselves and closing down and don't want to necessarily continue to be part of those conversations? Huh. I'll go with a huh. Some really good information there. It's a really interesting thing when we start to talk about the different how we start to talk about the different dynamics within families and how people navigate those with their new spouses and the new families, and if the new spouses have relationships with the kids and stuff. Yeah, wow, it's just so complex, and there's no one answer for everything. But this is just a nice conversation to expand the view of what can happen, what can't happen, and how people kind of navigate these really challenging situations. So thanks for listening to the show today. Please remember to like, if you have capacity, hit the donate button, support our 501c3 so we can bring you more content and some new services. And please remember to share and tell folks about what's going on. And if you haven't checked out the 12-step meetings, they're phenomenal. They're free. I think there's 14 or 15 weekly online now, really low threshold. Check it out. You like it, you come back. You don't like it, you don't come back. But it's a phenomenal, loving, kind, robust community. And we have the Family Hope Project if you want to get involved in that and put in some art and share some of your experiences. And we have all this different social media channels, Facebook, Instagram. Jump in there, join the conversation. There's a lot of great resources. And thank you for listening. Thank you for coming along on the adventure. And yeah, in case no one's told you that they love you yet today, I love you. And I'm grateful to be part of this community and to be on this adventure with you. Enjoy. Bye bye.